How many times during your week do you feel exhausted? Like you are just tired. Your body feels like you just need to stop and you want to do nothing else other than lie down on the couch, turn on the TV, and just let a few hours go by. Should you still be exercising if you're feeling this way? On today's episode of the Exercise is Health podcast, that is exactly the question that we will be exploring. We're going to cue the intro song and then we're going to dive right into this conversation. Welcome to the Exercise is Health podcast, where we're talking about exercise, health, and the interconnectedness of the two. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we will be coming to you every single week from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg. Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Charlie. Before we dive into this week's episode, I want to let you know that we recently released a book called The Exercise for Life Method. And if you enjoy the conversations that we have every single week on this podcast, then you are going to love this book. So to pick up a free copy of this book, all you have to do is go to exerciseforlifemethod.com. Now, without further ado, let's dive into this week's episode. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the Exercise is Health podcast. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we're coming to you from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg, here in Schaumburg, Illinois. Now, at Muscle Activation Schaumburg, we believe your health is your most valuable asset, and the single best thing that you can do to both boost and protect this asset is exercise. Specifically, exercise is geared towards building the health and function of your muscles. But is there ever a time when you shouldn't exercise? Is there ever a time when your body is just too depleted, or you are just not feeling well and you need to not exercise for that day? How many times throughout your day, throughout your week, do you think to yourself, it would be nice to get a workout in at some point, but wow, I am just so tired. I am just so exhausted. I don't even think it would be worth it. Have these thoughts ever crossed your mind? Because if so, listen up. This is exactly what we're going to be discussing during today's episode of the Exercise is Health podcast.
Charlie, I think one thing that you just said during that intro that is probably the most, I think there's two big points with this. Number one, you said, I'm so tired. Is it even worth it? Meaning, am I even going to be able to give 100%? And it's such an interesting concept because so many times we think if we can't give 1,000% in a workout, well then, is it even worth it? So I think that's really an area that we can really dive into because that is a myth that many people believe. And even when they logically know that, there's some stuff that can be done even when I'm not giving 1 billion%, but emotionally, I think we believe is it even worth it? Secondly, I think sometimes when we're exhausted, the most difficult part is getting going, not the actual workout. So I think that's another area that we can really dive into during this conversation because it is very common. I think we all overwork ourselves and we're all tired. All of us. I don't know of anyone that walks around every day on full throttle energy, but it also depends on where you're planning to put your energy for that day.
Absolutely. And I just want to add one more thing to that I think we should cover today is that the notion that exercise is something that should just deplete you further. It's pretty uncommon to think, well, if I exercise, that's actually going to boost my energy, or maybe I'll feel less exhausted. So I think we can explore that. So there you have it. There are show notes for today. If you like the sound of that, keep listening. If not, tune in next week. But let's get going. Let's dive into that first topic that you brought up because I think you are right on with what you are saying as far as that's a big myth and misconception out there. And a lot of people think that way.
I'm biased because I'm a personal trainer, meaning people schedule exercise with me. And if they don't show up, we have a 24-hour cancellation policy. So they will be billed for the session. And additionally, that's scheduled far in advance, right? Most people are just on a repeat every single week. So that means that my clients come to me on great days, on not great days, on expectedly great days, and unexpectedly not great days. And so that means that they're showing up no matter what. And I have had clients in the past, I don't currently have any right now, they try to and would prefer to cancel if they feel like they're not perfect that day. And I don't know about you, but I've never had a whole week straight where I felt perfect. There's always been a day where I've maybe felt off nutritionally, or I felt sleep deprived, or someone stressed me out. My coworker Charlie stressed me out. Something.
That never happens.
So there's always something. And I think it's so important to acknowledge that your workouts and people that work out consistently don't always have perfect workouts. But that's how they do it consistently, is to acknowledge that if you have the idea that your workout must be 1,000%, if that's the kind of person you are with your workouts, well, then you have to say, every workout I'm going to be going in not perfect sometimes. And that is okay. And you're still going to be receiving health benefits even when you're not at 100%.
What's interesting is in the mainstream fitness media, in the mainstream fitness Instagram, and the things that we see projected to us by the mainstream fitness industry, it's like one of two camps. Either you are going all out as hard as you can, or you're in therapy. There's no in between, right?
Yes.
So it's like, okay, either you can give everything you got every second that you're here, or you need to go see a physical therapist because, clearly you're broken and you can't be here, right? So there's no middle ground for people. So look, if that was all I saw, I'd be like, well, geez, I can't work out unless I can give everything I have because that's what I'm being told. And I don't feel like I'm broken to the point where I need to be going to see a physical therapist, but I surely can't give all that today. So I definitely understand where people are coming from, because that's what's projected to us is, well, you either give everything you have, and your everything you have today, it better be more than everything you had yesterday, because otherwise you're getting worse. You're not getting better. And so you better believe that if you come here, you're going to be sweating, you're going to be worked, you're going to feel like your body went through the ringer. And if you're not ready for that, well, we don't want anything to do with you. That's the message that is being projected by the mainstream fitness industry. And not only does it alienate a lot of people, but it definitely makes people feel like, wow, yeah, if I can't give it everything I have today, today's not a day for exercise. And to be honest, that's just a dangerous mindset to have. And it's not your fault. It's not your fault, because we've been conditioned to believe this. But the reality is your health hinges on your ability to exercise consistently. And if you are abstaining from exercise because you feel like your body's not ready, that's a big issue.
It's a super big issue, Charlie. And I love that you brought up so many of those good points where we feel like if we can't knock it out of the park every single workout, like, is it even worth it? Good news for you guys is that most of our audience, most people that listen to our podcast realize that, we're going to talk about exercise and how it is designed to improve your health, which means that you're exercising to improve your health. Most of our listeners, there's probably some of you out there, but most of our listeners aren't exercising as a career, and you're not exercising to perform. Meaning you're not preparing for marathons, you're not preparing for an Ironman. Now, there might be some of you guys in there, and that's fine. But when it comes to exhaustion, like, should I work out when I'm exhausted? The likelihood that your exhaustion has stemmed from you overdoing it in the gym is pretty low. You're probably more exhausted from other aspects of your life, like stress levels, maybe an underlying disease or ailment. Maybe it's poor nutrition, poor sleep. And so when you exercise appropriately, like how Charlie and I talk about week after week after week, this kind of exercise should actually be energizing and bring more mobility and more alertness to your body and your mind. It should not be depleting. It should actually be making you feel more alive. And so if you are feeling exhausted and you're in the normal category of people that listen to our podcast, meaning you're a regular or occasional or thinking about exerciser, and you're exhausted because you got a busy life, we all do, and it is really hard to feel energized and excited about your workouts sometimes, but it's very unlikely that you're feeling exhausted due to too much working out. And so adding in appropriate stimulus to your body is more than likely going to make you feel less exhausted and actually help you feel better.
Absolutely, it should help you feel better. Now, I think another point to bring up to this is just the relativity of what it means by like giving what you can give that day, right? So if we're thinking, okay, how am I performing relative to my absolute pristine peak state? Well, look, there are Olympic athletes that spend 4 years trying to make sure that on the gold medal day, they are in their absolute pristine peak state. But for the rest of us, that really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. Like, we're not there. We're not hitting that. It has absolutely no relevance. All that matters is how are you doing today and then exercising relative to that, right? So you're not thinking, oh my gosh, well, if I was more rested, I could do 150 pounds in a leg press, but I don't feel like I can do 150 pounds. I can only do 125 pounds. So clearly I shouldn't do it at all. It's like, no, work with what you have. Work with what you have, because that will be that stimulus to your body. That's actually going to be a lot more beneficial for you in terms of boosting your energy levels, in terms of helping you feel like your body's recovering and actually helping your body recovering, not just feeling like it, but then also giving you the strength and the stamina to get through your day easier without feeling this just kind of chronic exhaustion. Now, I'm not talking about like if you have an underlying condition that needs to be addressed medically, but if you're just kind of feeling, lethargic, tired, from one day to the next, exercise can be super beneficial to actually helping you feel like you have more energy throughout the day.
Charlie, you're so right. And I was thinking when you were talking about that, how exercise really allows you to be the best version of you as long as you show up and you do it on your great days and on your not great days. And you're giving the appropriate amount of stimulus to your body when you're feeling 1,000% and when you're feeling 30%. Those are both great days to exercise. On another note, when we're thinking about exercising when you're exhausted, it's important to realize, as I had said before, your root of exhaustion is likely not too much exercise. But as Charlie was saying, there might be some other underlying things like ailments or disease or lack of sleep, too much stress, lack of proper nutrition. And I have never heard of anyone that has added appropriate exercise and exercise didn't help with the other stuff too. Meaning, like, let's say you're exhausted because you're not sleeping well. Like, you're struggling with sleep right now. Maybe you have insomnia. I have yet to have a client that has come in that sleeps poorly that says that when they exercise regularly, their sleep gets worse. Usually, it's the opposite. And when we appropriately exercise, it kind of feeds in to the big picture of maybe why you're exhausted. I also notice that when people are saying, I'm really exhausted because I just eat like crap. Maybe I don't eat for a long time and then I eat dinner and that doesn't work well for my body, or I'm eating too much sugar. I've never had a client say, hey, when I regularly exercise, it actually encourages me to eat more poorly. People actually find ways to eat better. And I know in Charlie's book, he brought up about how exercising regularly actually primes your brain to continue with healthy habits. So it is not just anecdotal, but it actually really does happen and changes your brain when you exercise regularly. But that means regular exercise has to happen on real people, and real people have ups and downs throughout the week, have good days and bad days, and have days that you feel energized and days you feel exhausted. So keep showing up on those days you feel exhausted.
So, Julie, when was the last time that you slept fully through the night? And for some context, we have a daughter that's 2 years and 7 months old right now. And I mean, we have a son too, but as far as like how long this may have been going on for.
I haven't slept through the night probably in at least 2 years and 7 months.
Yeah, I'd say even, before
more,
that. Yeah, exactly.
Probably about 3 years.
Right, exactly. Okay, so would you say that during the last 3 years, there are days where you felt exhausted?
Yes.
Yeah, and I think any parent can relate, right? Any parent can relate to that there are days where you wake up and you're just like, wow, I feel exhausted, okay? And on those days when you feel exhausted, are you excited about exercising?
No.
Nope, no, definitely not.
Usually never.
Yeah, but do you do it anyways?
Mostly.
Okay, mostly. And, here's the thing, is you don't have to be 100% with it, but, is mostly better than not at all? Yeah, it's a heck of a lot better. Okay, Imagine this. Imagine for the last 3 years, You would just say, well, you know what? I'm just tired. I'm just not going to exercise for 3 years. How do you think you'd be doing right now physically and mentally and emotionally versus how you are doing?
Terribly.
Right?
Yeah,
Right.
I'd be so out of shape.
Exactly. Yeah. Sort of like deconditioned, poor strength, feeling just not well overall. Okay. So what do we have here? We have, for the last 3 years, not sleeping well, higher stress, higher demands on you physically, like a whole bunch of stuff going on. Were you perfect with your exercise? No. Were you 100% with your exercise? No. Is that what required? No, absolutely not. But just by doing something and being consistent with that something, not perfect, not, flawless, not never missing a day, but by doing something consistently, guess what? 3 years later, like you're still doing really well. You're still doing really well. Does that mean that you never feel exhausted? No. There are times where you wake up and you feel exhausted, or it feels like you never went to sleep. And so there's no waking up. You're just up and you feel exhausted, right? So, but guess what? You're able to tolerate that better. You're able to get through those harder days better because even when you didn't feel like it, you still did the work. Again, not every day. We're not talking perfection. We're not talking 100%. That's not what's required. What's required is doing it mostly. What's required is doing it mostly consistently. And what's required is doing it appropriately for your body, not saying, wow, I was up 7 times last night. I feel like I got about 90 minutes of sleep. All right, let's crush it. It's PR day. No. That's not what's happening. It's saying, yeah, my body's pretty depleted right now. I know I need to do something, but that something is going to be less. That it's just going to be less. I don't know how much less, but it's going to be less, but I'm still going to do something.
Charlie, you're describing my last 3 years in a really accurate way, but as I'm listening to you say it to me, I mean, that's what I've been living, but as I'm listening to what you've been saying to me, people go through stuff like this all the time, and that's what we call life. And sometimes it's like a smaller time period, meaning, I'm going through a job change, and I'm really stressed out, I'm applying for different positions. It's taking up more time. I'm sleep deprived. I'm anxious. And so that's making me tired, but it should fizzle out in 2 months. And people will use that as a reason to not exercise for 2 months. Or it might be something like, oh, we just started a family, where it's like how we are. It's been 3 years since I feel like I haven't woken up to someone needing some snuggles or something. And I think it's good to acknowledge, and I don't mean this in a heartless way, but no matter what you have going on in your life, whether it's stressful in a negative way or stressful in an exciting way, those are all things that are draining, and they can take away from your interest and what you feel you can put towards workouts. But the thing that is impactful for your workouts is showing up no matter what and doing something that matches where your body's at for that day.
Yeah, Julie, that is right on. That is such a key idea. So if you're listening to this now and you're thinking to yourself, you're like mentally raising your hand and saying, oh yeah, I've felt exhausted. I've had some days where I felt exhausted, or yeah, I usually feel exhausted. Okay, what do I do about this? Not what do I do about the exhaustion, but what do I do about, feeling like I don't want to exercise or not being able to get my exercise in? How do I go about changing this? There are some very simple steps actually that you can take to help you start getting your exercise in, even on the days when you feel exhausted. And guess what? It's not going to be as much of a time or energy demand as we often associate with exercise, because the first thing they're going to recommend you doing is start putting an emphasis on your all the time exercise. All right. See, a lot of times when we think about working out, we think about just our special event exercise, which is like you're lifting the weights, you're going for the run, you're doing the group class. All right. It's the event that you put into your calendar, that you change your clothes for, that's, relatively speaking, a bit higher intensity, maybe a bit more condensed time period. And so that's usually what people think of when we think of exercise. But there's a whole other side to this exercise life, and that is the all the time exercise. And all the time exercise is actually really low activity. And we don't typically think of it as exercise, but it's physical activity that you get throughout your day and is done intermittently throughout your day. Now, the great thing about all the time exercise is it can serve as kind of this bridge activity, which will help transition you from like not currently exercising into exercising either inconsistently or more consistently than you currently are. Okay. And so why this is because it gets you focused on actually prioritizing some physical activity throughout your day. So the good news for you is it's low intensity, so it's not an energy drain. And it's a low time commitment. You're doing it for like 3 to 5, maybe 10 minutes at a time, just kind of going for a quick walk. So it's not a huge time drain. There isn't any inconvenience factor as far as needing to go to a gym or change your clothes or anything like that. But it's going to keep you moving throughout the day. And that can be enough to start to transition you into being more prepared to exercise more intensely and more consistently.
My next tip for you guys is going to be to give yourself permission to change the amount of weight you're using, the reps you're using, and the sets that you're doing. A lot of times when we feel exhausted, we feel like we have to just go to Netflix and chill, like lay on the couch, or you feel like you have to do something like go for a slow walk or do yoga, something like that. And I'm not saying either of those are bad, but if today was a day you were supposed to weight train and you're exhausted, I give you 100% permission to go and cut your weights in half and do less reps and do less sets, but still get that appropriate muscle squeeze and the muscle stimulus that your body was planning to receive that day. So you have my permission to do that. Still show up to your weight training and just chop things down either in half or whatever is feeling appropriate for you that day.
Then the last tip we have is once you start to exercise and you get into the swing of it with your workout, stop while you still feel good. And a lot of people are like, wait, what do you mean? Like, I've finally convinced myself to go do this thing. And now it's getting to the good part and you're telling me to stop? And yeah, I'm telling you to stop because guess what? If you stop while you still feel good today, there's a greater likelihood that you're going to feel good tomorrow and you're going to be more able to do it again tomorrow. And that's really the big thing, right? Is like, okay, yeah, anybody can do a one-off workout, but we're looking to be able to exercise today and tomorrow and the next day in spite of the fact that we may be feeling exhausted. So if you can muster up the energy and the discipline to exercise today and you get into the groove of it, do not have it be a workout that you go for 60 minutes and you go all out and you're just feeling depleted by the end. Stop while you still feel good. Not only should you be cutting your weight in half, cut your time in half. Give yourself a time limit to say, you know what, I'm going to go exercise, but I'm stopping by this time. Like, I don't care how good I feel while I'm doing it. I'm stopping by this time, whether that's after 20 minutes or after 30 minutes, and then just stop then. And then you're going to be more likely to wake up the next day and actually feel good and feel ready to exercise again on that day, which is the whole goal, right? Exercise today, exercise tomorrow, exercise for the rest of forever, because that is how you're going to continue to build the health and function of your body with exercise. So who do you know that needs to hear this episode? Who do you know that has expressed interest in exercising, but often says, yeah, you know, I'm just too tired, or I am just so exhausted. I don't know how I will find the energy to exercise. Share this episode with them so they can hear our tips, tricks, and tactics about how to go about actually structuring their workouts and conducting their workouts and why they should be exercising even when they feel exhausted. And while you're online, head on over to iTunes and leave us a rating and review. I saw recently that we have cracked the 40 review mark, 45-star reviews. So if you want to be the 41st or more, head there now, leave us that 5-star rating and review because we really appreciate it. It helps more people find this podcast, especially when they're looking for information on exercise and when they're looking for information on health. So if you found value in this conversation today, let us know by leaving us that 5-star rating and review. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. We always appreciate it. Have a fantastic week, and we'll talk with you all next week. So how'd you like that episode? Did you find the information useful? If you enjoyed what we discussed today, then you are going to love the Exercise for Life method, which is a book that we just put out and you can get a free copy of by going to exerciseforlifemethod.com. All we ask is that you pay for shipping and handling, so head there now and get your free copy, as well as some exclusive bonuses that you will get instant access to when you get the book. You can learn more and get your copy at exerciseforlifemethod.com. This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Julie and Charlie Cates, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical issue, consult a licensed physician.